So I grew up in the Christian world. My dad is actually a pastor. And a prominent question that gets asked within this world is called the problem of evil. Now, the problem of evil is pretty simply the question that if God is good and he is all-powerful and also all-knowing of everything that is happening in the world, why do bad things happen? If he is aware of someone, say, about to get hit by a bus, why would he not just stop the bus or move the person away from the bus? Or here's a more extreme example. If God is aware of the ongoing slavery, sex trafficking, murder, and he is a good guy, why would he not stop that immediately? Well, Christians have a lot of answers and theories in response to this question, most of which I don't really buy. But it was this question that began my disillusionment with the church. How could somebody who has the power to stop the horrors of the world allow these things to go on and still be good? Now, I've grown up a bit and grown away from the Christian world since I originally asked that question to myself. And nowadays I would say that somewhere near the bedrock of my worldview is that humans are inherently good. That sure, you can get some outliers, some mentally insane people who do some terrible things, but 99.999% of people are good people who can still be traumatized and twisted and do bad things, but at their core are trying to do the right thing and be good. I also think that humans are geniuses in all the things that we have accomplished. When we put our minds to it, we can build beautiful cities, launch people to the moon, create iPhones, AI, and incredible technology. And lastly, we are in the age of the internet, where we are acutely aware of happenings all around the world. Despite being in Canada, I am aware of an earthquake in Sri Lanka, flooding in Venice, or the persecution of Uyghur Muslims in China. Through modern news networks and the internet, humans are more globally aware than they have ever been throughout history. So now, knowing these three facts about humanity being good, powerful, and relatively all-knowing, how is it possible that so much evil, terrible, horrible stuff happens all over the world? And are we all complicit?
I can trust in the melody, in the song I can find me.
So before I get into my argument as to why evil exists, despite humanity's goodness, power, and knowledge, I think it's important to address some of the challenges and counter-arguments to the claims I just made. So one of the ways that Christian theologians take on the problem of evil is by poking holes in one of the three truths of God being omniscient, omnipotent, and benevolent. Process theology takes on the omnipotent claim by saying that God's power is more relational than physical. A more Western, mainstream, evangelical theology takes on the benevolence of God, suggesting that us humans aren't able to comprehend his master plan and that the suffering that happens now is necessary for this great plan to come to fruition. Now, if you can think of a way in which the Holocaust could possibly be for the greater good, please leave a comment in this video because I would genuinely love to know. One last very prominent theological argument that gets made a ton is called the free will defense, where God basically tied his hands together and said, I'm not going to do anything for the sake of free will of humanity. But either way, for the secular parallel to this problem of evil, you can start to get an idea of where you could poke holes in my metaphor. But I think everyone can understand where I'm coming from beyond the problem of evil. The larger point that I'm trying to make, the one that I think a lot of people will agree with, is this. We as humanity are capable of being better than this. We have the goodwill, we have the technology, we have the knowledge, which may not be up to par with a God level of perfection, but certainly there should not be as much hardship and terribleness going on in the world. So why are things the way that they are? Why does evil still exist? So I have three areas that I think exclusively point to why evil exists at such a high level. Also, I hope that you know I'm using evil not in a religious way, but more as a word to describe general not goodness. So let's ask this question, why does evil exist? Number one, humanity isn't evil, but it sure is corruptible by money, power, rhetoric, drugs, sex, and much, much more. But corrupt isn't even the right word because I feel like that lends too much responsibility to the individual. Humans are regularly traumatized and misled from a young age by their families, communities, and society that they grow up in. On a familial level, your life and personality is shaped by your family. Pew Research has found that between 80 to 90% of children inherit the same politics and religion as their parents. But you could extend this line of thinking into any personality trait, including people's interests, values, and even moral judgments. A large number of people who grew up in a family that hates gay people are most likely going to hate gay people, whether or not gay people are objectively evil. Spoiler alert, they're not. Now, I don't think that this is a reflection of evilness or the lack of humanity inside of that kid or even the parents. They could be a regular Mother Teresa or Gandhi if they grew up in a neutral environment. But we are so deeply shaped by our family environment. And from a young age, your environment, while primarily influenced by your parents, is also influenced by your friends, your community, and the society that you grow up in. So normal actions of a human within our society is not a result of humanity's tendency towards normalcy, but rather the result of being a product of the society that they grew up in. Here's an uncomfortable truth. You may think that in the event of a totalitarian, horrible regime in your home country, such as the rise of Nazis in Germany in the late 1930s, that you would valiantly resist the movement. You would be the one hiding Jewish people in your basement and working against the government from the inside. But in reality, most of the Germans at the time didn't. And it's not because they are inherently evil as human beings, that something was in the water in Germany during this time period that created magically evil, unempathetic humans. It was just that specific culture, that specific society during that specific time period. But before you click off this video and say, it sure sounds an awful lot like this blonde white guy is defending Nazis, that is not at all where I'm coming from. I say all these many examples to argue for the philosophical concept known as determinism. I truly believe that if not 100%, surely 99% of the choices that we make as humans are determined by our environment, from what you eat to breakfast, to what job you choose, to what political party you vote for. And I could get into this more in another video, but I actually think that knowing this fact can make us more empathetic, better people. But in the grand scheme of why does evil exist in the world, it is firstly important to understand that humans are not operating in a vacuum. We are a product of our environment, and in the case that our environment is supremely negative, we will behave negatively. Reason number 2, global capitalism without sufficient guardrails, something that is very hard to do, is rife for abuse and exploitation. I already know some people are going to get triggered by anything remotely anti-capitalist, so please suspend your belief for a minute. I'm not arguing for a better system in this video. I'm just pointing out the flaws in the one that we have in the greater context of my argument. So since the dawn of capitalism at the end of the 18th century, exploitation of workers, resources, and environments have been chief among its flaws. Now, exploitation exists, of course, due to the dichotomy between the capital owner wanting to pay its worker as little as possible to create the most amount of surplus value. But I'm not claiming to be an economic theorist, and I don't think that you have to be in any way to understand that exploitation is prevalent under unfettered capitalism. Now, look no further than the cobalt mines in Congo, where adults and children are paid next to nothing to essentially kill themselves mining for the thing that we in the Western world put in our iPhones. Or look to China, India, or Bangladesh with horrible factory conditions brought on only because they are the cheapest, least regulated countries that can make clothes for us. Now, the obvious reaction to this is that regulation, minimum wages, and better working conditions are the ultimate cure for this exploitation. But within a global capitalist system, the labor will always go to the lowest bidder, the least regulated, cheapest labor it possibly can. You can even see something like this in the Western world, where the UK almost blocked Microsoft from buying a game company, Blizzard, citing that it would be essentially a monopoly, to which Blizzard threatened to leave the UK for a less regulated country until the UK eventually agreed to the deal under slightly different conditions that met its concerns. Finally, someone might argue that global poverty is improving and that we'll eventually get to a place through regulation where everyone in the world is paid a livable wage, works in a good environment, and isn't exploited. And to those people, I would argue that 90% of the commodities that you enjoy in the Western world are built off of exploited labor somewhere along the line, and that the removal of that exploitation will only mean either less commodities or higher prices, discouraging consumerism, which drives our global capitalistic society. But B, and much more importantly, that is not how global capitalism operates in the world today. So we can spend a long time dreaming about the future of a perfectly regulated, well-oiled economic system for the world. But the reality is, exploitation exists and is prevalent today. And in the argument of why evil exists in the world today, global capitalism as a framework functions by exploiting certain groups of people. Also, I've been mentioning a lot of the capitalism side of global capitalism, but how about the global side of things? While this economic system is so good at what it does, it has brought people from all over the world to participate. But because of that, there is a disconnect between the goods that we buy and the process in which it's been manufactured. Surely, if there was a sweatshop down the street from you, you would protest and make sure that people got paid a fair living wage and that the workers are advocated for. But if it's in Bangladesh and there's some conglomerate larger than life running it, it seems impossible to change, and it's kind of also out of sight, out of mind. Now, global capitalism isn't inherently evil, but it is the framework and the means to which people get exploited. And it's this exploitation, from the mines in Congo to the factories in Bangladesh, the drug cartel in Mexico, that all relies on the mechanics of global capitalism. Evil made more efficient by this excellent, all-encompassing economic system. But there's one final piece to this puzzle, because the system and the individuals alone work in conjunction with one other factor that may seem the most inconspicuous of them all. Let's talk about reason number 3 for evil in this world: the dilution of moral responsibility made possible through organizations and ideology. In totality, throughout history, the formation of collectives and collectivist thought has opened the door for the worst acts that humanity has committed. Because of the dilution of moral responsibility, the splitting up of blame between a large enough group of people, humans have been able to do the most inhumane things that would otherwise be impossible as individuals. And we have seen this time and time again with empires of the past conquering, killing, and raping in the name of their flag. We see this with Christian crusades murdering millions in the name of religion. But even on a smaller scale, we have seen tribes fighting other tribes for land and resources, causing irreparable harm in the process. But those are conflicts and evil doings of the past, I hear you saying. We are more involved and more enlightened than we used to be. But through modern day organizations of companies and huge corporations fueled by global capitalism, we are all able to commit the same atrocities of the past without feeling personally responsible. Somehow we all have phones that have parts in them that were made by slaves in the Congo, t-shirts that were made by child labor in Bangladesh, and buy and consume a variety of items on a daily basis that were made using exploitation without feeling personally responsible for any of it. And I want to emphasize here that I'm not trying to play the blame game and tell you that you have to essentially abstain from being a consumer of anything to be a morally good person, because that is simply impossible to do. See global capitalism. You are not able to survive in the Western world without a phone, without a shirt, or without certain consumer goods that rely on exploitation. But at the same time, the slave mined cobalt didn't just magically appear into the phone that I'm holding every day. So who do we blame for this surplus of evil that exists? The next person I naturally look to after the consumer in the case of something like cobalt mining would be the Apple employees. Okay, we get it, you're just a consumer, but how about the people who are employed by Evil Corp? Surely they should take a lion's share of the blame. But no, Apple employs over 100,000 people. Are we really gonna start blaming the janitor or the people who are designing the cameras for the newest iPhone? No matter how you cut it, because this bad act is being diluted between so many people, we feel like it is justifiable. Because somehow the slave labor is built into the iPhone at such a tiny minuscule percentage of the total product, the consumers don't care, and the Apple employees don't care. And finally, you may find yourself working your way up the chain, as many do, and begin to blame the people who actually have the control of where Apple sources their cobalt. The executives and overseers of operation. These people may seem like they have the direct control over where Apple sources their cobalt, but I'll raise you two counterpoints. A, let's say that Joe Apple, chief director of cobalt mining, decides that Apple is going ethical with its cobalt sourcing. He will surely be soon fired and replaced by somebody who cuts costs and make iPhones reasonably priced again. And B, the only reason people like Joe Apple get into the executive positions that they are in is because of their willingness to put the organization of Apple and its preservation over anything. Even they are dispensable if they do not serve Apple as a company.
So, quick correction, Apple has actually now pledged to use 100% recycled cobalt by 2025. But my point still stands, as Google, Samsung, and many others source cobalt unethically to this day. But more importantly, this move is more likely to be a public image rehabilitation effort after being under the microscope by media and critics over the last few years. However, whatever the company or whatever the material that is being sourced,
even these executives can blame global capitalism and a lack of power over their organization for their actions. And honestly, they would be correct. But let's take a quick detour from global capitalism, because any organization, including countries, are able to do terrible things like engaging in war in the name of preservation of their huge organization, touting the operation as a net positive despite the massive amounts of death and destruction. And the war on Ukraine is a great example of how, yes, there is an evil dictator committing horrible atrocities, but how Russia's population's commitment to their own survival and well-being allows them to not only be complicit with evil, but to also pay money towards it in the form of taxes and be enlisted to fight for it. And the ongoing war between Israel and Gaza is another example with a more religious group of organization. All these examples feature organizations exerting power on the behalf of their population. While I believe that no individual would be able to stomach co-signing this kind of violence personally, no individual Russian would be able to stomach seeing all of this mass violence that their organization has committed on their behalf. But whether it's the name of capitalism, religion, country, or ideology, when we organize as a group, we are able to do things that one person would never have the heart to do. And another thing worth mentioning is that organizations like these have a tendency to act to preserve themselves, even at the expense of their participants. Russia is again a great example of this. But I know that this point is dragging on a bit, so I'll conclude with this little hot take that you'll probably disagree with. I truly believe that almost all humans participating in these organizations, governments, religions, even at some of the highest levels, are good people. Or at least people who think that they are good people in their own twisted way. But largely because of either capitalistic incentives, self-preservation incentives, or the dilution of moral responsibility through taking such a small piece of evil pie, they find a way to spin their work as good or necessary. We all find our own unique little ways that we can justify such reciprocities, and that's how good people do bad things. We are firstly individually seduced and influenced at a young age by the people around us and the society that we grew up in. We are then formally seduced by groups we join, the companies we work for, and the movements that we are a part of. And finally, we all operate within a global capitalist system that encourages the accumulation of capital at the expense of others. From micro to macro, these are the reasons why evil exists, despite what seems like the conditions for good. If I had to categorically sort the types of bad stuff that happens in this world as a result of one of these 3 points, I would say that individual crimes like rape, murder, abuse, etc. are the result of individual trauma and a failing of being raised properly by your family, community, and society. I would say that crimes like wars, genocides, bombing campaigns, mass incarceration, etc. are a result primarily of the dilution of moral responsibility made possible through organizations. And systemic abuse like the cobalt mining in Congo or the sweatshops in Bangladesh are a result of unfettered global capitalism. Although my main point with this video is that these things work in conjunction with one another. No murder is exempt from systemic problems and bad organizations. No war is exempt from personal trauma and capitalistic incentives. No sweatshop is created without governments allowing it and individual executives of companies approving it. And I also want to stay far away from the narrative of blame that may arrive when I say things like, we are all complicit. This is a video about how good people can allow for bad things to happen, and to leave this video thinking that you are either a bad person or other people are bad people is beyond reductionist and is actually the opposite of my point with this video. So, how do I conclude this video? I think that primarily the prevalence of so-called evil in this world is not an indictment of any sort of the amount of quality of goodness that also exists. One of the building blocks that is closest to the foundation of my beliefs is that humans are inherently good, and that it's through this lens that I'm able to see the atrocities of life as exceptions to the rule, not the rule itself. Now, that being said, I don't fucking know if we're going in the right direction or the wrong one. And knowing isn't half the battle, because I'm still going to live in a country that would commit a crime against somebody. And I still am going to wear clothes that are made in sweatshops and do some shitty things sometimes. And that doesn't make me a bad person, but it also doesn't make the bad things go away. I feel a little defeated, but maybe that's actually a normal, natural reaction to this onslaught of negativity. I don't know where we go from here, but I hope that things get better. Maybe you can help me brainstorm a way in which we can get there. And thank you for sticking with me to the end of this video, a video in which I pretty much lost my voice by the end of it. And I don't normally do this, but if you did make it to this point in the video, it would be great if you could do all the good algorithm things of liking, subscribing, commenting, because it really does help me out and help this channel grow. Anyways, new good videos and content soon. Thank you for watching. Bye.